The Galactic Council chamber was filled with whispers and laughter. Thousands of alien delegates sat in the grand hall, their faces twisted in cruel amusement. The massive screens above them broadcasted a single image, a human, bound in chains, standing on a wooden platform. Ambassador Daniel Ross had come in peace. He had traveled light years to negotiate a treaty between humanity and the Council. He had brought no weapons, no threats, only words, only hope. But the Council had decided otherwise. Ross stood tall despite the chains digging into his wrists. His uniform was torn, his face bruised from endless interrogations, but his eyes remained steady. He did not beg. He did not plead. He knew what was coming. The High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, Vor Malik, stepped forward. His reptilian scales glowed under the chamber lights, and his forked tongue flickered as he spoke. Humans are dangerous. Humans are unpredictable. You hide your true nature behind diplomacy, but we see through your lies. He turned to the gathered crowd, his voice rising. This creature came here asking for peace. We give him our answer today. A deafening cheer erupted from the crowd. Ross took a deep breath. He knew this was not just about him. This was a message, a warning to humanity. And humanity was watching. The execution. A massive pyre had been built in the center of the chamber, an ancient method of execution, chosen specifically for its cruelty. Ross was dragged onto the wooden structure, his body aching from the beatings. The council guards tied him tightly to the stake, their claws scraping against his skin. He looked up, past the flames that were about to consume him. A camera drone hovered above, broadcasting everything live. He knew his people were watching. His voice was hoarse, but he forced himself to speak. You have no idea what you've just done. The Chancellor smirked. Oh, but we do. With a wave of his clawed hand, the flames were lit. Fire erupted around Ross. At first, there was only heat, then unbearable pain. He clenched his jaw, refusing to scream. But his body betrayed him, and a cry of agony tore from his lips. The aliens in the chamber cheered louder. They laughed as the fire consumed him. And then he was gone. Nothing remained but ashes. The Chancellor turned back to the camera drone. His expression was one of triumph. This is the fate of all who oppose the Council. With a single motion, he ended the broadcast. And across the stars, on a blue planet far away, Earth watched in silence. Earth's reaction. Inside a hidden military command bunker on Earth, the most powerful leaders of humanity sat in stunned silence. The room was dark, except for the glow of the now-ended transmission. The last screams of their diplomat still echoed in their minds. No one spoke, not for a long time. Then the President of Earth stood up. Her voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. Status report. A general tapped on a console, his voice cold and sharp. Fleet is mobilizing. Strike teams are ready. Orders. Another pause. Then, in a voice filled with iron, the President said, "Burn them all." The first strike. The Galactic Council expected humanity to send protests, to beg, to surrender. They expected weakness. What they got was annihilation. Before the Council could even celebrate their victory, the first wave of human warships appeared from the darkness of space. No warnings, no declarations, just fire. The first Council world was erased in a single night. And the message was clear. Humanity had arrived. And there would be no mercy. The silence after the execution broadcast was more terrifying than any war declaration. Across Earth, from the bustling cities to the hidden military bases, billions of humans watched the screen in shock. Some gasped, some wept, some sat frozen in disbelief. But one thing was the same everywhere. Their fear quickly turned to rage. For centuries, humanity had tried to prove itself a peaceful species. They had entered the galactic stage with open hands, not clenched fists. They had sought alliances, diplomacy, and understanding. And how had the Galactic Council responded? By burning their diplomat alive, by laughing as he screamed. Something changed in that moment. Something deep inside humanity's soul. Something ancient and dark. The aliens had wanted to send a message. They had. But they had no idea what message they had just received in return. The silent response. The Galactic Council expected outrage. They expected angry human diplomats to send demands. They expected threats, protests, pleas for negotiations. They expected weakness. Instead, they got silence. Not a single transmission came from Earth. No diplomatic envoys, no statements, no negotiations. Just a deafening, terrifying silence. At first, the Council believed this meant fear. They assumed humanity was too broken to respond. They were wrong. Humanity was not broken. They were planning the largest military mobilization in human history. In the depths of space, hidden human fleets began to move. Warships that had never been seen by alien eyes left their secret stations, each one armed with weapons far beyond anything the Council had ever encountered. Stealth cruisers, designed to move undetected, infiltrated enemy space. Assassin squads were deployed, quietly eliminating key enemy targets before war even officially began. Deep within underground bunkers, the unified human military command gathered. Generals, admirals, intelligence officers, all of them sat before massive screens, displaying holograms of Council-controlled space. Every fleet formation, every weak point, every hidden station was laid bare. They studied their enemy not for peace, but for extermination. And then a single order was given. No warnings, no mercy, no survivors. The first strike, the end of Xanthur. The first target was Xanthur, a heavily fortified Council world known for its massive military presence. It was one of the planets that had voted for the execution of the human diplomat. It would be the first to fall. The Council expected an invasion. They expected fleets, ground troops, a long battle. They expected war the way they had always known it. But humanity didn't fight like the other species of the galaxy. They fought to win. They fought to erase. Without warning, the sky over Xanthur turned black. Thousands of human warships emerged from warp space, blocking out the planet's sun. For a brief moment, the Council's forces scrambled to react. Warnings filled the planetary defense systems. Alarms blared. Commanders shouted orders. Then, humanity's first wave of weapons rained down. Rods of solid tungsten, fired from orbit at near-light speed, struck the planetary surface with the force of nuclear explosions. Entire cities vanished in an instant. The first hour alone killed over 1 billion aliens. The few who survived looked up at the dark sky, screaming as fire and death rained down upon them. The Council had expected diplomacy. They had never expected this. The Council's realization. When word of Xanthur's destruction reached the Galactic Council, shock and fear gripped them. Never before had they seen such devastation. Never before had a single species acted with such overwhelming force. The Council chamber, once filled with arrogant laughter, was now filled with terrified whispers. How? How could they do this? One ambassador stammered. This wasn't a battle, another muttered. It was execution. High Chancellor Vor Malik, the same leader who had ordered the human diplomat's death, felt true fear for the first time in his life. This was not the response he had expected. This was something else, something far worse. And for the first time, he realized the war had already been lost. The beginning of the end. As the Council scrambled to understand what was happening, more reports flooded in. Council fleets were vanishing. Entire planets were going silent. Outposts that had stood for centuries were erased in mere hours. Every attempt to communicate with humanity was ignored. The silence continued. But this time, the Council understood what it meant. It meant doom. It meant humanity had no interest in peace. It meant they were next. And no force in the galaxy could stop what was coming. Humanity had arrived. and the Galactic Council was running out of time. The destruction of Xanthur sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had always ruled with arrogance. They had conquered weaker species, crushed rebellions, and silenced any who dared to oppose them. They believed themselves invincible, the ultimate power in the cosmos. But now, for the first time in history, they were afraid. Xanthur had been one of their strongest military worlds. Fortified defenses, planetary shields, elite fleets, yet it had fallen in a single night. The planet had burned beneath human firepower, its cities reduced to craters, its armies annihilated before they could even fight back. The Council had always viewed humanity as insignificant. Now they realized their mistake. And worse, Xanthur was just the beginning. A desperate council meeting. The council chamber, once a place of laughter and political games, was now filled with panic and shouting. Ambassadors of countless alien species argued, their voices filled with desperation. They must be stopped. One roared, slamming his fist on the table. We must negotiate. Humanity has made its point. Another pleaded. High Chancellor Vor Malik, the reptilian leader who had once stood over the burning human diplomat, remained silent. His claws tapped anxiously against the stone surface before him. No warnings, no mercy, no survivors. That was the message humanity had sent, and so far they had not broken that promise. The Council had faced wars before, but this was different. This wasn't war. This was extermination. Mobilize the fleets. One of the military leaders finally commanded. We must defend the Council worlds before the humans reach them. But they had no idea how close the humans already were. The siege of Gorath Prime. The Council's strongest remaining military fortress was Gorath Prime, a heavily armed planet, home to one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. If any world could stop humanity, it was this one. The Council poured all their remaining forces into Gorath Prime. Warships, battle stations, planetary shields. They built the strongest defense the galaxy had ever seen. And then, the sky darkened. Just like with Xanthur, the humans arrived without warning. But this time, they did not strike immediately. Instead, they waited. For hours, their massive black warships hovered in orbit, watching, letting fear fester in the hearts of the defenders below. Admiral Corazon, the Council's top military strategist, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the screens. Why aren't they attacking? One of his officers asked. Corazon had no answer. Humans did not fight like any species he had faced before. Then, the humans finally spoke. A message echoed across every channel, reaching every soldier, every leader, every civilian on Gorath Prime. Surrender or be erased. The Council had never surrendered before. They had no plans to start now. They sent their answer back. Come and try. And humanity did. The battle begins. The first wave of human fighters descended from orbit, moving at speeds the Council's weapons couldn't even track. Council ships opened fire, but the humans were faster, more precise. They weaved through the barrage of energy blasts like ghosts, hitting their targets with ruthless efficiency. Then the human battleships arrived. Massive, armored war machines, they unleashed devastation unlike anything seen before. Council fleets collapsed within minutes. One by one, their proudest warships exploded, torn apart by human firepower. Admiral Corazon watched in horror as his entire fleet crumbled around him. His officers screamed, desperate for orders. There are too many of them. Our shields are useless. We need to retreat. Corazon clenched his fists. Retreat. There was nowhere to run. He turned back to the screen, where the human fleet was closing in. For the first time in his life, he felt truly helpless. The fall of the fortress. Gorath Prime's planetary shields were built to withstand months of siege. Humanity tore them down in minutes. Once the shields collapsed, human orbital bombardment began. Massive kinetic strikes pounded the surface, wiping out military bases, command centers, and defensive installations. The Council's forces, once the strongest in the galaxy, were slaughtered. Cities turned to fire and ash. Elite soldiers, the best warriors the Council had to offer, were gunned down before they could even lift their weapons. Human ground forces landed next, not to conquer, not to claim territory, only to destroy. The message to the galaxy. When the dust settled, Korath Prime was no more. Not a single Council soldier remained alive. The world that was once the pride of the Galactic Council now lay in ruins, a graveyard of metal and bones. And then, across every communication network in the galaxy, humanity broadcasted one final message, a simple warning, sent to every species, every world, every leader who had watched and done nothing when their diplomat burned. Surrender or be erased. The Council's fear. Back in the Council chamber, there was no more arguing. No more debates, no more boasting, no more talk of superiority. Because now, the truth was clear. Humanity was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The Galactic Council had never known fear. For centuries, they had ruled with absolute power. They had crushed rebellions, wiped out entire species that defied them, and imposed their laws upon every civilization they encountered. They believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. But now, they were the ones being hunted. Ganther was gone. Korath Prime had fallen. Humanity's war machine had turned the Council's greatest strongholds into graveyards. Their fleets had been shattered, their armies torn apart before they could even mount a real defense. The species who had once mocked Earth's diplomacy now trembled at the mention of its name. And worst of all, humanity still hadn't spoken. The silence was unbearable. No demands, no negotiations, no peace talks. The Council sent desperate messages to Earth, pleading for an end to the bloodshed. Humanity didn't answer. They only continued their march of annihilation, a council on the brink of collapse. The Council chamber, once a place of absolute authority, now felt more like a prison. High Chancellor Vor Malik sat at the head of the table, his reptilian hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Around him, ambassadors from dozens of alien species whispered among themselves, their voices trembling. "There must be a way to stop them," one muttered. "We must surrender," another argued. "Surrender." An enraged ambassador from the Korath system slammed his fist on the table. "They don't want surrender. They want revenge." The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was true. Humanity had crossed the line between war and vengeance. There would be no treaties, no compromises, no mercy. High Chancellor Vor Malik closed his eyes. He knew who was to blame. He had given the order. He had burned the human diplomat alive. And now the fires of that execution had become the flames that were consuming the galaxy. The last plan. With no options left, the Council turned to one final plan, a desperate, reckless strategy. If it worked, they might survive. If it failed, there would be no one left to remember their mistake. The plan was simple: kill the human leadership. Humanity's forces were unlike anything they had ever faced. Their technology was beyond what the Council believed possible. Their soldiers fought like demons. Their warships tore through fleets like a blade through flesh. The only way to stop the slaughter was to cut off the head. They had to assassinate Earth's leaders, the Council's most elite operatives. Trained assassins, infiltrators, and spies were gathered. These were beings who had ended wars with a single well-placed shot, who had toppled entire governments without ever being seen. If anyone could do the impossible, it was them. Their mission was clear: infiltrate Earth, eliminate the High Command, end the war before humanity destroyed the entire galaxy. There was just one problem. No one had ever tried to attack Earth before, and no one knew what waited for them. The assassins arrive on Earth. The infiltration team moved in total secrecy. Using stolen human transport codes, they slipped past the outer defenses of the Sol system. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful. A blue and green paradise, covered in vast oceans and glowing cities. It didn't look like the homeworld of the most terrifying species in the galaxy. But as the assassins descended through the atmosphere, they quickly realized something was wrong. This wasn't a world in chaos. This wasn't a civilization struggling under the weight of war. It was normal. People walked the streets, laughing, talking, living their lives as if nothing was happening. Shops were open, families enjoyed meals, children played in the parks. It was as if humanity wasn't even concerned about the war. As if they had already won. The assassins' first mistake. The operatives moved quickly. Their target was Earth's high command, hidden somewhere beneath the surface of the planet. Their plan was to move in unnoticed, eliminate the human leadership, and escape before anyone knew they were there. The Galactic Council was out of options. The assassination attempt on Earth's high command had failed spectacularly. Their elite operatives, some of the deadliest assassins in the galaxy, had been wiped out, not by soldiers, but by ordinary humans. Now, there was nothing left to do except wait for the inevitable. Humanity had been relentless in war. Now, it would be merciless. For centuries, the Council had played politics, conquered weaker species, and crushed rebellions without a second thought. They had ruled the galaxy through fear. Now, they were the ones who were afraid. Across the galaxy, entire civilizations prepared for their doom. Because the humans were coming. And this time, there would be no survivors. The fall of the Council worlds. One by one, the great worlds of the Council fell. The first target was Zirac 9, a fortified planet known for its powerful defense fleets and impenetrable shields. The Council had considered it one of their safest strongholds. It lasted less than 6 hours. The human fleet arrived in silence, their black warships blocking out the stars. The Council's defenders barely had time to react before their sensors went completely dark. Communication systems failed. Defense grids collapsed. The humans didn't even bother negotiating. The bombardment began without warning. Fire rained from the sky, turning entire cities into craters. Millions died before they even understood what was happening. And then the humans landed. Their soldiers moved without mercy. Every council officer, every military leader, every official who had once mocked humanity's weakness was executed on sight. By the time the last human warship left the system, Zirac 9 was nothing but a wasteland. The Council's strongest military world had been reduced to ash. And the worst part, it wasn't even their real target. The terror spreads. News of Zirac 9's fall spread faster than light. The Council's remaining members watched in horror as footage of the destruction reached every corner of the galaxy. The message was clear. You burned one of us alive. Now we burn everything you love. Entire civilizations began to surrender before humanity even reached them. Worlds that had once sworn loyalty to the Council now sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for mercy. But mercy was no longer an option. Humanity didn't want surrender. They wanted revenge. And nothing would stop them. The mass exodus. As the human fleets moved closer to the Council's core systems, panic spread like wildfire. Millions fled their homeworlds, hoping to escape before humanity arrived. Entire planets were abandoned as their people scrambled for safety. But there was no safety, because wherever they ran, humanity followed. A massive refugee fleet, carrying billions of terrified civilians, tried to escape to the farthest edge of the galaxy. Humanity intercepted them. For a brief moment, the refugees hoped for mercy. After all, they weren't soldiers. They had nothing to do with the war. But the humans didn't care. One by one, their ships were destroyed. No survivors, no exceptions. The galaxy finally understood the truth. This wasn't just a war. This was a purge. The last stand. The Council's final stronghold was Orvas Prime, a massive fortress world where the last surviving leaders had gathered. If humanity was to be stopped, it would be here. Every remaining warship, every soldier, Every weapon the Council still had was thrown into the defense of Orvas Prime. The battle was the largest in galactic history. Thousands of warships clashed in space, energy weapons tearing through the void. Planetary cannons fired massive plasma blasts, trying desperately to keep the humans from landing. It didn't matter. The humans were unstoppable. Their ships were faster. Their weapons were stronger. Their soldiers were deadlier. Within hours, the Council's fleet was reduced to wreckage. And then the real nightmare began. Humanity landed. The streets run red. The ground battle for Orvas Prime was nothing short of slaughter. The war was over. The Galactic Council no longer existed. Their fleets were destroyed, their armies crushed, and their homeworlds left in ruins. What once ruled the galaxy through fear and power had been reduced to ash and silence. Humanity had done what no species in history had dared to do. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They erased them. But now, as the fires of war cooled, the galaxy was left with a terrifying question. What happens next? The silence after the storm. For centuries, the Galactic Council had been the dominant power in the universe. Their laws, their rules, their authority had shaped the lives of trillions. Now, there was nothing. No central government. No ruling species. No laws. Entire star systems drifted into chaos. With the Council gone, pirate lords, warlords, and rogue fleets seized power wherever they could. The void left by the Council's destruction was quickly filled with anarchy. For a time, the galaxy became a battlefield. Old rivalries reignited. Slaver factions, once kept in check by the Council, rose again. Former vassal species, who had lived under Council oppression for centuries, fought to claim their own power. But they all knew one thing. No matter how much they struggled, nothing could stop humanity. The judgment of Earth. Humanity watched the chaos from a distance. Their fleets remained in orbit over the ruined Council worlds, their warships black and silent, like specters of death. No one knew what they would do next. Would they conquer? Would they rule? Would they finish what they started? For weeks, no word came from Earth. No demands. No declarations. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity's next move. And then they made their decision. A single broadcast was sent across the stars, from Earth itself. A warning. The Galactic Council is no more. The war is over. We do not seek to rule. We do not seek to govern. But let this be clear. Never again will humanity tolerate injustice. Never again will we allow such cruelty to exist. If we must burn the stars to keep peace, we will. The message was simple. Humanity did not want to control the galaxy. They did not want to replace the Council. But they would never allow another power to rise against them. The fate of the Council's allies. Not everyone had fought against humanity in the war. Some species had stayed neutral. Others had even secretly helped Earth, providing intelligence and resources when the war first began. Now those species waited to see if humanity would spare them. The answer came quickly. The species that had aided humanity were rewarded. Their worlds were left untouched. Their people were allowed to live in peace, freed from the fear of destruction. But those who had sided with the Council, those who had cheered when the human diplomat burned alive, they were not forgiven. Entire planets were erased from the star maps. Civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were turned to dust. The galaxy finally understood. Humanity did not believe in second chances. The new order begins. With the war over, humanity withdrew its fleets. They left ruined worlds behind, graveyards of ash and fire. But they didn't claim territory. They didn't demand tribute. They simply vanished back into the dark, returning to their own systems, their own worlds. Yet, everyone knew they were watching. From that moment on, every species in the galaxy knew one undeniable truth. Humanity was the new law. They did not need a council. They did not need an empire. Their mere existence was enough to keep the peace. Because everyone knew, if another war ever started, if anyone dared to challenge Earth again, the stars themselves would burn. The galaxy's greatest fear. Decades passed. New governments formed, but none dared to call themselves a Galactic Council. No species attempted to claim the title of rulers of the galaxy, because the memory of what happened still haunted them. There were still worlds that had never recovered, planets that had been burned so completely that they were now nothing more than floating husks, silent reminders of what happened when humanity was pushed too far. The galaxy had changed, and there was one lesson that every species, every civilization, taught their children from the moment they were born. Never provoke humanity. Never test their patience. Never forget the war. Or the next time, there will be nothing left. The end, or the beginning. This was not the rise of an empire. This was not the creation of a new galactic order. This was simply the beginning of a new era, an era where humanity stood alone at the top. They had no throne. They had no crown, but they ruled the stars through fear alone. And as long as the galaxy remembered the war, that fear would never fade. The galaxy had changed. Decades had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. The ruins of their once mighty empire still floated in space, burned-out planets, shattered space stations, and silent graveyards of fleets that had dared to stand against Earth. But humanity had not claimed the throne. They had returned to their own systems, rebuilt their worlds, and vanished into the shadows of the cosmos. No one knew what they were planning. No one knew if they were still watching. But every species lived in fear, because one question haunted them all. What would happen if someone dared to test humanity again? They were about to find out. A fool's gamble. The HFY Dominion had grown bold. For years, they had whispered in secret. They had watched as the other species cowered, too afraid to take power. They saw opportunity in the silence, in the fear. To them, the destruction of the Council had created a power vacuum, and they intended to fill it. The Dominion's leader, Supreme Warlord Krelvok, believed humanity was nothing more than a beast that had gone back to sleep, and he was arrogant enough to think he could wake it up and survive. The attack on Outpost Theta. The first strike came suddenly. A human outpost. Theta 9, a small colony on the outer rim, was attacked without warning. The HFY warships descended on the planet, bombarding its defenses before the humans could react. Within hours, the colony was overrun. There were no survivors. Krelvok made a public announcement, standing in the Grand War Hall of his homeworld. His voice was broadcasted across the stars. The humans are cowards. Their war was nothing but rage, not strength. They do not rule this galaxy. They hide in it, and we will not fear them any longer. His people roared in approval. Other civilizations watched in silence, horrified, because they knew what was coming. Humanity had been provoked. And the last time that happened, entire civilizations had burned. The Ghost Fleet arrives. For 6 days, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity did not respond. No threats, no declarations of war, just silence. And then, on the 7th day, the stars died over HFY Prime. The Dominion's homeworld, protected by its vast fleets, should have been impenetrable. But the humans had changed. They did not send a fleet that could be seen. No massive armada. No overwhelming force. Instead, they arrived like ghosts. One by one, the Dominion's warships went dark. Entire battlecruisers, fully armed and crewed, simply vanished. No explosions, no distress signals, just silence. The HFY scrambled to respond. Warlord Krelvok screamed for answers. How was this happening? Who was attacking? Then the reports came in. The humans were inside the capital city. Not an army. Not an invasion force. Just a handful of black armored figures, moving like shadows. The death of a warlord. The palace guards were the best warriors the HFY had to offer. They lasted less than 2 minutes. Krulvok barely had time to reach for his weapon before the first human soldier appeared in front of him. He had never seen a human up close before. The stories had described them as monsters, nightmares wrapped in flesh. But what he saw was worse. The human was calm. No rage, no hatred. Just cold, empty precision. Krulvok tried to speak, tried to negotiate. He never got the chance. The human raised his weapon, and the last thing Krulvok saw was the end of his empire. A message to the galaxy. The next day, every species in the galaxy received a single transmission from Earth. A warning. It showed Skilari Prime burning. It showed the remains of the Dominion's fleets shattered in orbit. And then a human voice, calm, measured, and final, spoke 4 words. Let this be enough. There was no further explanation, no threats, no demands, because there was no need. The message was clear. The beast had not been sleeping. It had been watching. And now, everyone knew the truth. The galaxy's eternal fear, the destruction of the HFY Dominion, became the final lesson. No species, no empire, ever tried to challenge humanity again. The galaxy did not need a council anymore. It did not need rulers or dictators, because humanity was the only law that mattered. And as long as the stars burned, the galaxy would never forget. Do not provoke Earth. Do not test humanity's patience, because next time, they might not stop.